Have you ever woken up on a perfectly ordinary morning, not sick, with no obvious crisis at all, yet just the thought of getting out of bed already feels exhausting? Not the kind of tiredness that comes from lack of sleep, but a heavy feeling that's hard to name. As if your body is quietly asking for permission to stay still a little longer, even while your rational mind keeps reminding you that you have to keep going. Carl Jung once wrote, "The psyche is self-regulating." He believed that the soul is always trying to adjust to protect its inner integrity, even when our conscious mind hasn't yet understood what is happening. And sometimes, the only thing it can do is slow you down. The desire to lie down all day is not always a sign of laziness or a lack of motivation. It can be a very subtle message, signaling that something inside you is being stretched too far, or that you are living out of sync with your true inner rhythm. In this video, we will walk together through 9 deep, hidden signs that Jung believed the mature soul often uses to speak up when the body and the mind are struggling with each other in an attempt to create a more perfected version of the self. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, but if you listen closely enough, these 9 signs may change the way you understand your own exhaustion. Sign 1. A part of you no longer wants to continue living the old way. Adult life sometimes puts you in a state where you don't feel sick. No fever, no specific pain anywhere. Your indicators are fine. You can still eat, sleep, and talk normally. Yet something very strange happens. Your body refuses to get up. Not the kind of exhaustion that comes after an overly demanding day, but a heavy feeling, spreading evenly through your entire body, as if gravity has suddenly increased just for you. Your limbs slow down. Your rhythm falls out of sync. In your head, you can still clearly hear the familiar voice. I have to do this. But beneath all those urges, your body answers with a short, decisive sentence, with no room for negotiation. No. The most uncomfortable part is that you can't accurately name what is happening. If there were pain, you would at least have a reason to rest. But here, everything is still fine. Only you are not. And that very ambiguity makes you start to feel uneasy. You wonder if you are being lazy, if you are being too weak, if you are exaggerating your own feelings. You compare yourself to others, people who still wake up early, still keep going steadily, remain stable in the way society praises. And the more you compare, the more at fault you feel. Perhaps you have whispered to yourself before, "What is wrong with me?" Not out of anger, not out of rebellion, just a quiet, lingering confusion, exhausting in its own way. You feel as if you are being betrayed by your own body, as if it no longer listens to you. You want to get up, but you can't. You want to begin, but your whole body refuses to cooperate. And deep inside, a vague fear begins to take shape. If you can't even control your own body, then what exactly are you slowly losing? This often happens to people who are used to forcing themselves forward, people with discipline, with responsibility, with a high tolerance for endurance, people who don't give up easily and don't stop easily. Precisely because of that, when the body suddenly stops listening, the feeling of losing control becomes especially frightening. Not because you are weak, but because you have lived by sheer willpower for too long. Here, a very deep conflict is unfolding, even if you can't name it. On one side is the part of you that still believes you must continue, must maintain the old rhythm, must preserve the old image, must remain loyal to choices that were once right, once necessary, once helped you survive. On the other side is a different part, quieter, not arguing, not explaining, but beginning to withdraw its cooperation. And the first place it does this is the body. Carl Jung once wrote, "The body is the very concrete manifestation of the psyche." Jung did not see the body as a separate machine to be controlled by willpower. He viewed it as an inseparable part of inner life. When something within the soul no longer agrees with the way you are living, the body will be the first to speak up, not through words, not through reasoning, but through slowness, heaviness, and delay. Not to punish you, but to stop you from going further down a path that has already run its course. According to Jung, when the conscious ego, the part of you that always tries to control, maintain, and endure, stubbornly clings to a way of life that no longer fits, the unconscious will withdraw energy from action. It does not shout. It does not openly resist. It simply stops supplying fuel. And when energy is no longer provided, every action begins to feel heavy, meaningless, and slow. This is not a collapse. It is a protective mechanism. Try to recall a very ordinary morning. The alarm goes off. You open your eyes. Everything is familiar. The same room, the same light, the same schedule. Nothing unusual. But just thinking about stepping outside, meeting familiar people, doing familiar tasks, repeating familiar conversations, your body suddenly slows down strangely. You sit on the bed longer. You delay getting dressed. You pick up your phone and put it back down, not because you don't know what you need to do, but because some part of you no longer wants to continue this way, even if you haven't dared to admit it. You might blame yourself in that moment. You might force yourself to get up, go out, and get through the day with all your usual toughness. But if you pay close attention, that heaviness doesn't disappear. It only gets pushed aside temporarily, and then it comes back, day after day, thicker, clearer, until you can no longer pretend you don't hear it. Now try to relax your body, close your eyes, and ask yourself honestly whether you are trying to keep living in a rhythm that your inner self no longer agrees with. This question is not comfortable, but it needs to be asked sincerely. Not so that you rush to change everything, not so that you conclude you made the wrong choices, but so that you begin listening to the dialogue that is taking place between your body and your soul. Carl Jung emphasized that the unconscious does not care about what one should or must do according to social norms. It cares only about the wholeness of who you are. When you continue to maintain a role, a rhythm of life, an identity that no longer reflects your true inner self, the unconscious will find a way to intervene. And the most subtle form of intervention is making the body stop cooperating. This explains why the harder you try to force yourself to be strong, the more exhausted you feel. The more you tell yourself to push just a little further, the heavier your body becomes. Because the issue is not the amount of effort, it is the direction. You are not lacking strength. You are moving away from something deeply fundamental to you. Perhaps you have grown used to ignoring small signals, used to pushing through fatigue, used to suppress the feeling that something is off, used to convincing yourself that it will pass. But the body does not work that way. It is not persuaded by reasoning. It responds directly to the inner truth. And when that truth is ignored for too long, the body will choose to stop in your place. What is needed here is not confrontation, not fixing or forcing yourself back to normal, but stopping the urge to be strong at the very moment when that strength is going against a deeper inner need. Allowing the body to slow down is not surrender. It is an act of listening, a form of respect for what has been overlooked. You don't need to know the answer right away. You don't need to create a new plan. You don't need to make any major decisions. The first step is simply to acknowledge, something inside me is not okay, and my body is trying to say that. That acknowledgement alone begins to soften the inner conflict. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The heaviness in the body is not something to be driven away. It is a form of darkness asking to be recognized. When you allow yourself to stay with it for a moment, without judgment, and without rushing to fix it, you begin to hear questions you have long avoided. What am I trying to hold on to? Who am I living for? What am I afraid will happen if I stop? And within those questions, you slowly realize something essential. Your body is not working against you. It is not sabotaging your life. It is protecting boundaries you have not yet dared to set. It is speaking for you the things you have not yet dared to say out loud. The desire to lie down all day, in this case, is not avoidance. It is a signal, a whisper, that it is time to stop forcing yourself to live up to an old image. Time to allow a different rhythm, a different identity, a different way of being to take shape, not all at once, but beginning with listening. And if you are here, hearing these words, perhaps you have felt this for a long time. Your body has been speaking to you. Only now are you truly beginning to listen. Sign 2. Your energy wants to disappear, even though everything is still fine. Not all exhaustion comes from doing too much. Some exhaustion comes from living in the wrong place. There is a kind of exhaustion that is very hard to name. It does not arrive after days of physical overwork. It does not come with any obvious event, crisis, or shock. On the contrary, everything looks fine from the outside. Work is still moving forward. Responsibilities are still being fulfilled. Relationships are still calm. No one is hurting you directly. There is no legitimate reason to complain. And precisely because of that, the emptiness inside becomes even more confusing. You are not falling apart, but you are no longer truly present either. You do everything the same way you always have. Only something essential is missing, something very difficult to put into words. There is no real enthusiasm anymore. No longer the feeling of, this is me. Success still comes, but it does not land. Praise sounds distant. Goals that once excited you now feel like checkpoints to get through and be done with. You complete your day, but when you look back, you don't know where you actually lived inside that day. And then, in those rare moments of quiet, a strange longing appears. You just want to lie down, sometimes, to sink into a heavy sleep, to escape a present that no longer awakens any joy. Sometimes you lie down simply because you want to be still, as if the entire inner system is asking to be muted. What scares many people is this thought: everything is fine, so why do I feel this way? You begin to doubt yourself. You wonder if you are being too demanding, if you are lacking gratitude, if you are creating problems where none clearly exist. And then you force yourself to keep going, because your rational mind is still strong enough to argue that, I have no right to be tired. But Jung saw this phenomenon from a completely different perspective. He believed that in certain phases of life, psychological energy does not disappear. It withdraws. Not because you are weak, but because you are living within a structure that is no longer true to the person you are inside. And when that happens, the unconscious begins to reclaim vitality from the roles, paths, and choices you are maintaining only out of duty or expectation. Carl Jung once wrote, "The psyche withdraws energy from forms that no longer correspond to the inner truth." End quote. This is not punishment. It is a recalibration. When you continue to remain in spaces that no longer reflect your true values, whether work, relationships, or an image of yourself, energy gradually pulls inward. Quietly, without collapse, just a silent retreat that makes you start to feel empty in the middle of a life that seems complete. You still work, but you no longer feel like you are building anything. You still communicate, but you no longer feel genuinely connected. You still reach goals, but you don't see yourself in the outcome. And that is when the body and the soul begin to send signals in the only way left, by making you tired in a way you cannot explain. Try to look at one of your most recent days. You wake up, do what needs to be done, and fulfill familiar responsibilities. Nothing is overwhelming. Yet by the end of the day, you are exhausted differently, not muscle fatigue, not mental fatigue, but the exhaustion of having to play yourself in a version that is no longer true. You may have thought before, maybe I just need more rest. But you rested. And the feeling remained, because the issue is not the number of hours you sleep. It is where you are placing your life energy. Jung described this as a redirection of psychological energy. When the conscious ego continues to maintain familiar structures because they are safe, approved, or expected, the unconscious quietly says, this is no longer our place. And when energy withdraws, you begin to feel like an observer in your own life. You may notice this most clearly in moments that seem small. When someone asks, how have you been lately? Are you doing okay? Are you doing okay? And all you answer is, I'm fine. And you know that answer is correct, but not honest. When you achieve something you once desired, yet the inner response is only a silent emptiness. When you no longer feel eager to tell your story, because you yourself no longer feel that it belongs to you. Perhaps you are living in a role built long ago, a once necessary role, once gave you recognition, safety, and love, but the person inside you has changed. Values have shifted, needs are different now, and energy no longer wants to stay in the old place. Carl Jung said very clearly, life really does begin at 40. Up until then, you are just doing research. This statement is not about age. It is about a psychological threshold, a moment when a person no longer lives solely to meet the external world, but is called back toward a deeper center. And when that call appears, anything that is no longer true gradually loses its vitality. That is why the desire to lie down all day during this phase is not giving up. It is an instinctive withdrawal, an effort by the soul to pull you out of mechanical motion, so you have the chance to hear something deeper unfolding within. You might ask yourself now, is there something in my life that exists only because of expectation, not because it fits me? Is there a role I maintain only because I am afraid of disappointing others? Is there a choice I have stayed with for too long, even though inside I left it long ago? These questions are not comfortable, but they are keys, not to force immediate change, not to abandon everything. Jung did not encourage extreme cuts when energy is withdrawing. On the contrary, he emphasized the necessity of awareness before action. The solution here is not a dramatic move. It is recognition. Recognizing which parts of your life you are living for others. Recognizing which choices you continue because you should, not because they are truly aligned. Recognizing that energy does not disappear randomly. It is showing you where home no longer is. Carl Jung once wrote, "What you resist persists." If you continue to deny this emptiness, if you keep forcing yourself to be fine, be grateful, try harder, you are only prolonging a life that is no longer nourished from within. And then exhaustion will not lessen. It will deepen, become harder to name, and more painful. But if you allow yourself to pause long enough to listen, something else happens. You begin to realize that energy did not leave to abandon you. It is left to force you back toward your true values. To ask you, if there were no one watching, would you still want to be here? If you didn't need to prove anything, would you still choose this? And it is in that stillness, in those days when you only want to lie still, that a new map begins to form. Not clear, not loud, but more truthful, closer to you. You don't need to rush. You don't need answers right away. You only need to be honest with this feeling. You only need to acknowledge that this unexplained exhaustion is trying to say something very important. Energy does not leave you to punish you. It leaves you to lead you back. Back to a place where you don't have to strain to survive. Back to a place where you don't need to perform to be accepted. Back to a place where your true self can finally breathe. And if right now all you can do is lie down, know that this is not failure. It is the moment your soul is whispering, "We need to live more truthfully." Sign 3. Your body wants to withdraw from the world. You don't hate anyone. You're not angry with anyone. There is no clear conflict, no drama, no obvious tension. But when messages arrive, you feel tired. When an appointment gets closer, you suddenly want to cancel. Even a very ordinary check-in from someone can be enough to make you sigh quietly inside. Not because anyone else is wrong, but because, right now, your body simply wants to be at rest, without having to respond, without having to explain, without having to strain to be present for anyone anymore, and that, inside you, already feels like enough. And the silence at this moment is not avoidance. It is the only way the remaining parts of you can breathe. Perhaps you have experienced this before. You see your phone vibrate, recognize a familiar name, and instead of feeling happy or eager, you feel a very gentle, but very clear pull. I don't want to reply right now. Not because you are upset with them, but because inside you, there is no longer any space left to receive anything else. A conversation, no matter how friendly, becomes an invisible burden. What confuses you is the question, why am I like this? You begin to blame yourself. You wonder if you are being selfish, if you are becoming cold, if you are turning into someone distant. You want to be alone, yet at the same time, you feel guilty for wanting that. You fear that if you withdraw, you will hurt others. You fear that your silence will be misunderstood, and so you become stuck in between. Staying feels exhausting, but withdrawing makes you feel at fault. This is a very particular kind of overload. Not overload caused by the crisis, not by a packed schedule, but overload from the constant presence of the outside world. You no longer have enough energy to respond, to listen, to share, to be there for others in the way you once did, and your body begins to send a very clear signal. It wants to withdraw. Carl Jung did not see this withdrawal as a problem that needed fixing. On the contrary, he saw it as a necessary phase of psychological transformation. Jung believed that there are moments in life when the unconscious needs to pull a person away from the outer world to restructure the inner one. Without this retreat, the soul cannot reorganize what has accumulated, what has become tangled, what has been neglected for too long. Carl Jung once wrote, "There are times when the psyche needs to withdraw from outer adaptation to attend to inner necessity. When you are constantly required to adapt, to respond, to be present for others, without space to return to yourself. An imbalance slowly forms, and the body, loyal to inner truth, chooses to pull you back, not with words, but with fatigue in communication, disinterest in meeting, and a very instinctive need to be alone. What is important to distinguish here is this. Withdrawal is not the same as escape. Escape carries fear. Withdrawal carries self-preservation. When you escape, you are avoiding something. When you withdraw, you are protecting what remains of yourself. And your body understands this distinction clearly, even if your rational mind has not yet caught up. Think about the days when you lie still all day. No schedule, no calls, no need to do something useful. Just lying there, breathing, watching the light change in the room. And strangely, in that stillness, you feel safe, not joyful, not very happy, but a very real feeling. Here, I don't have to strain. This is not laziness. This is your nervous system resting. This is your soul saying, for now, the outer world is too loud. We need quiet so we don't fall apart. Jung believed that if a person does not allow themselves to withdraw consciously, the unconscious will force them to do so in more painful ways. Burnout, depression, or a deep loss of connection with oneself. Withdrawing at the right time is not a weakness. It is a self-regulating mechanism of the psyche. But because modern culture glorifies openness, communication, and constant connection, the need to withdraw is often misunderstood. It is easily labeled as closed off, negative, or hard to approach. And when you feel the need for quiet, you begin to doubt yourself. You try to show up a little more, reply to one more message, go to one more meeting, and each time, you lose a little more of your life energy. Perhaps it is time to ask yourself a very important question. Do you need quiet? Or are you trying not to inconvenience anyone? These are very different things. When you need quiet, that is a legitimate need. When you are trying not to inconvenience anyone, that is a learned reflex, placing other people's feelings above your own needs. And if you keep choosing the latter, your body's withdrawal will grow stronger, because that is the only way it can protect you from erasing yourself. Carl Jung emphasized that psychological maturity does not come from dissolving completely into the world, but from the ability to move in and out of the world flexibly. Some phases require presence, and there are phases that require withdrawal. Both are necessary. Problems arise only when you do not allow yourself to withdraw, even when your soul is depleted. The solution here is not disappearing completely, not cutting off all relationships, not closing yourself off from the world. Jung did not advocate isolation. He spoke of conscious withdrawal. This means you intentionally create space for yourself, rather than letting your body force withdrawal through exhaustion. What does conscious withdrawal look like? It means allowing yourself not to reply immediately, canceling a meeting without inventing elaborate excuses, choosing silence without self-accusation, saying, I need some quiet right now, without feeling that you are doing something wrong. When you withdraw this way, you do not lose connection. On the contrary, you preserve your capacity for genuine connection, because only when you are not overloaded can your presence have depth. Only when you are not worn down can you truly be there for others. Carl Jung once wrote, loneliness is not necessarily the absence of people, but the inability to communicate the things that seem important to oneself. If you have no space to listen to yourself, you will gradually have nothing left to share with others, and then, even in the middle of a crowd, you will feel lonely. Withdrawal at this point is not about avoiding others, but about preserving your own voice. So when you long to lie down all day, when your body wants to withdraw from the world, don't rush to label it as negative. Try to see it as a very clear message. I have given enough. Now I need to return. Withdrawing at the right time is not a weakness. It is the healthy boundary of the soul, a boundary not built to push the world away, but to keep you from losing yourself within it. And if you are in this phase right now, if silence is calling you, know that you are not broken. You are recalibrating. You are learning to respect your true rhythm, and that is not a step backward. It is a necessary step on the journey back to yourself. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying and listening slowly enough. Not everyone is willing to pause and enter into dialogue with themselves like this. If this content resonated with you, gently tap like or share it with someone who may be tired and doesn't yet know why. Sometimes, simply knowing we are not alone is enough to breathe a little easier. Give yourself a few seconds of rest right here, no thinking, just feeling. And now, we will move on together to the next sign, where you'll begin to go even deeper into what this exhaustion is truly trying to lead you toward. Sign 4. You are standing between two versions of yourself. Carl Jung once touched on a deeply uncomfortable truth, yet profoundly accurate when describing the human experience during periods of deep exhaustion. He wrote, "The most intense conflicts, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm that is not easily disturbed. Before that calm arrives, there is always an intermediate phase in which a person scarcely knows where they stand. This is the moment when the old identity can no longer support you, while the new identity has not yet taken shape. And it is precisely in this space that your body often wants to lie still, neither moving forward nor turning back. If you are here, you may already feel this very clearly. You are no longer who you used to be. The things that once excited you, once defined who you were, and once gave you the feeling that, this is my life, now feel faded. You look back at yourself from a few years ago, sometimes even just a few months ago, and notice a strange distance. Not quite dislike, not quite regret, just a quiet certainty that you cannot go back to being that person anymore. But the problem lies here. You also do not yet know who you are becoming. The future appears vague. Choices that once felt clear suddenly lose their pull. Paths that once felt familiar no longer feel safe. You are standing between two shores, one that has collapsed behind you and one that has not yet emerged ahead. And in that in-between space, your body responds by slowing down, very slowly, to the point where you want to lie down all day, as if by not moving, time itself might stop pressing against you. This feeling is often accompanied by a sense of disorientation that is hard to name. You are not exactly sad, but you are not happy either. You are not panicking, yet there is a constant, dull heaviness inside. You feel stalled, but not because you are lazy, rather because you no longer know what you are striving for. Every action feels like a question without an answer, and once again, the body chooses silence. In Jungian psychology, this is a profoundly important transitional state. Jung described it as a liminal phase, where a person enters an unclear zone of being. He believed that during such periods, the unconscious must expend enormous energy, dismantling the old structures of the ego and preparing the foundation for a new one. This process is not loud. It does not bring an obvious sense of progress. On the contrary, it often makes a person feel as though they are standing still or even moving backward. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Quote, "Because the unconscious is doing such heavy work behind the scenes, energy for outward action is withdrawn. You no longer have the strength to keep going as before, but you also do not yet have a new form to move forward into. And during this time, your body chooses to lie still, not to escape, but to avoid disrupting the process unfolding within. You may notice this clearly in everyday life. You no longer want to return to your old life, your old job, old routines, old roles. Just thinking about going back to what once felt familiar already makes you tired. But when you think about changing completely, starting something new, you feel uncertain, even anxious, not because you lack ability, but because you do not yet know who you are in that new context. And so you become stuck between two states, unwilling to return, yet not ready to move forward. This is when an unspoken question arises within you, even if you rarely articulate it. If I am no longer the old version of myself, and not yet the new one, then who am I right now? This question has no quick answer, and each time it surfaces, your body wants to lie down, as if saying, we don't need to know yet. Jung believed that modern humans are deeply afraid of the state of not being anyone yet. The culture around you constantly pressures you to have labels, who you are, what you do, where you stand in life. But Jung saw profound value in allowing oneself to exist in an undefined state. He argued that if a person rushes to define themselves during a transitional phase, they may unknowingly build a new identity on old foundations that have not yet been fully dismantled, and this leads to familiar cycles of exhaustion. Perhaps this is the moment to ask yourself, with genuine honesty, are you allowing yourself to be no one yet? Or are you forcing yourself to quickly become a new version just to escape the discomfort of uncertainty? The desire to lie still all day is not always a sign of giving up. Sometimes, it is a request for permission to remain a little longer in this in-between space, where the soul is still working very seriously, even if outwardly nothing seems to be happening. The solution during this phase does not lie in searching for a grand answer. Jung did not encourage people to rush into shaping the future while the unconscious is still restructuring. What is more necessary is staying in the quiet long enough for new forms to emerge on their own. This requires immense patience and self-respect, because you must accept that you cannot clearly explain to others, and sometimes, even to yourself, where you are in life. Staying in the quiet does not mean abandoning yourself. It means allowing yourself to live more slowly, easing the pressure to be fine, to be clear, to move on. It means listening to your body when it wants to lie down, not to escape life, but to avoid interrupting the transformation that is underway. Jung emphasized that true transformation always occurs in silence, and only when that process is complete does energy return naturally. And then, very subtly, you begin to notice the change, not through a dramatic decision, not through a spectacular breakthrough, but perhaps one morning you feel lighter when thinking about the future, or a small idea appears without force, or a vague yet unmistakable feeling arises. Maybe I'm beginning to know that I no longer want to live the old way. These are signs that a new identity is starting to form, from the inside out. So if you find yourself longing to lie down all day, if you feel stuck between two versions of yourself, remember this: lack of clarity is not failure. It is a sign that you are being reborn. Not all stagnation is stopping. Some pauses exist to prepare you for a more authentic way of living. And in this phase, the bravest thing you can do is not to push forward at all costs, but to remain long enough for your true self to arrive. Sign 5. The creative fire within you is being suppressed. As we grow older, we are forced to become familiar with fatigue, but each kind of exhaustion carries its own characteristics and messages. There are times when you are not doing too much. Your schedule is not suffocating. Your work is still under control. And yet, you still feel deeply tired, deeply reluctant to move, deeply in need of rest. This kind of fatigue is very hard to explain to others. It makes your body feel heavy all the time. Your mind feels slowed down. Each morning when you wake up, you just want to lie still a little longer, as if simply getting up already feels like a major effort. And what is strange is this: this fatigue does not feel like burnout. It feels like something has been compressed, pushed down, held back for far too long. You may have asked yourself, why am I tired when everything seems fine? That question often has no clear answer, because the cause does not lie in how much you are doing, but in what you are not allowed to do. It is not doing too much that makes you want to lie down all day. It is because there is a part of you that is not being allowed to live out what it longs to create. This feeling is very subtle. On the outside, you still appear to be functioning. You fulfill your responsibilities. You do what needs to be done. But on the inside, energy is not flowing outward. It is being compressed. And when energy is compressed for too long, it does not disappear. It transforms into stagnation, heaviness, and restlessness. You want to lie still, not because you are empty, but because there is fire inside you, and you do not know where to place it. This is a very characteristic state of people who possess creative capacity, but are living too correctly within their roles. You fulfill your duties, you live reasonably, you make safe choices, but over time, you feel yourself slowing down, not because you lack motivation, but because your motivation is no longer allowed to follow its natural direction. You feel as though you are carrying unused energy, and that very fact is what exhausts your body. Carl Jung did not see creativity as limited to art, writing, painting, or music. For him, creativity was the way human life energy finds its path outward. When this flow is blocked, the psyche bears the consequences. Jung wrote, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity. When the inner need for expression is ignored, it does not vanish. It turns inward, placing pressure on the entire psychological system. This is why there are periods when you feel tired, yet you dream intensely. Ideas surface when you lie still, not when you force yourself to get things done. Images, thoughts, vague longings rise when you stop trying to control everything. You may lie staring at the ceiling, and in your mind appear the things you once wanted to do, once wanted to try, once felt alive thinking about. But then you push them away because they feel unrealistic, because it's not the right time, because I don't have time for those things anymore. And in the very moment you push them away, your body becomes just a little heavier, not immediately, but enough that each day waking up feels harder than the day before. Jung believed that when creative energy is suppressed, it does not turn into silence. It turns into psychological exhaustion. You are not exhausted because you do too much. You are exhausted because you are not allowed to live in alignment with your inner flow. You may notice this clearly in everyday life. You complete your work, but it does not feel like, this is me. You do well, but you do not feel alive. Success still comes, but it no longer touches you the way it once did. And when you lie still, instead of feeling empty, your mind is filled with unfinished ideas, unwritten scripts, projects that were never allowed to begin. This is not a contradiction. It is creativity searching for air. Jung believed that creativity is an instinct, and like all instincts, if it is repressed, it will find a way to express itself through symptoms. In some people, this becomes anxiety. In others, a sense of dullness. And in many people, it becomes the desire to lie down all day, not to escape life, but because the body is trying to reduce the pressure of energy trapped inside. At this point, the question is not, should I change everything? The more important question is this: is there a part of you that has been living too practically? Is there a part of you that was once vibrant, curious, eager to create something, but has been pushed aside because of duty, expectations, or roles? And if so, how have you treated that part of yourself in recent years? Many people believe that if they cannot do something fully or grandly, then it is better not to do anything at all. But Jung did not view creativity that way. He did not ask you to immediately change your life, quit your job, or chase a dreamlike path. What he emphasized was respect for the need to express. Sometimes, opening even a very small door for creativity to flow outward can significantly reduce inner pressure. The solution here is not to force yourself to be creative properly. On the contrary, the more you force it, the more blocked the flow becomes. What is needed is permission. Permission to write a few lines that no one will read. Permission to draw without needing it to be good. Permission to speak an idea without turning it into a project. Permission for energy to move outward without being judged immediately. Jung wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. The way you express yourself does not need to resemble anyone else's. It only needs to be true to you." You may notice the difference very clearly when creativity is given even a narrow opening. Your body feels lighter, your sleep becomes deeper, the sense of restlessness decreases. You no longer need to lie still all day just to endure inner pressure, not because all problems have been solved, but because life energy has found an outlet. And when energy flows in the right direction, it no longer weighs you down. Jung believed that when creativity is honored, it becomes vitality. When it is ignored, it becomes a burden. That is why two people can have the same workload, the same pace of life, yet one feels alive while the other feels chronically exhausted. The difference does not lie in what they do, but in whether their inner energy is allowed to move outward. So, if you are longing to lie down all day, if you feel exhausted while a quiet fire still burns inside, try listening to this message differently. Perhaps your soul does not need more rest. It needs expression. Not to create something grand, but to stop being further compressed. And when creativity is honored, even through a very small act, your body will no longer need to lie down under the weight of what has not been lived. You are not tired because you are weak. You are tired because you are carrying more within you than your current life allows you to express. And when you begin to open up, even just a little, that exhaustion will gradually give way to a very different feeling, the feeling of coming back to life from within. If you have moved through these 5 signs and begun to view your exhaustion through a different lens, then perhaps you have also sensed something else. This is not the end. Because when we look deeper, Jung believed there are still 4 more signs, more subtle, more silent, that adult life uses to speak to your inner world through very ordinary longings for rest. And in the next part, we will slow down together and step into those deeper layers, where exhaustion is no longer a problem to fix, but a message waiting to be heard. Sign 6. You are exhausted from living in someone else's time. There is a very strange kind of fatigue that many adults experience, especially when they have not done anything wrong. You still wake up on time. You still complete the tasks assigned to you. You still keep your promises, stay responsible, and do not quit halfway. Yet your body slows down in a way that is hard to explain. Each step feels a little heavier. Each decision requires more effort than before. And deep inside, there is a persistent sense that you are being pulled along too fast compared to the rhythm you can actually keep up with. You ask yourself, why am I this tired when everything seems fine? The answer may not lie in the workload, but in the tempo of the time you are living in. There is a subtle truth that Jung once hinted at. Human beings do not live in only one kind of time. We live simultaneously in social time where everything is measured by calendars, hours, and deadlines, and in inner time, where every movement needs the right moment to have meaning. When these two kinds of time fall out of sync for too long, the body begins to speak. Jung once wrote, "There are things which must be experienced and not explained. Some things cannot be understood by reason, only lived through. Inner time is one of them." You may complete a task on schedule, but if your soul is not ready for that step, the price you pay is prolonged exhaustion. You are not lazy. You are not weak. You are not lacking discipline. You are arriving too early for yourself. Try to notice a very small phenomenon. On some days, just thinking about leaving the house already makes your body slow down. Not because you hate your work, not because you hate people, but because inside, you have not yet arrived at the rhythm of the life waiting for you out there. Every action feels forced, and when that forcing continues for too long, the unconscious will find a way to apply the brakes. Jung clearly distinguished between two streams of time: chronos, the linear time of society, and kairos, the ripe moment of the inner world. Chronos asks, when will it be done? Kairos asks, is it time yet? When you live entirely according to chronos and neglect kairos, the body becomes the only place honest enough to say, not yet. And so you begin to long to lie still all day. Not because you want to escape, but because in that stillness, social time temporarily stops. There is no countdown clock, no urgent schedule, no expectant gazes. There is only breathing, heartbeat, and the feeling for the first time, that day of living, according to your own time. Have you ever felt this? The moments of greatest exhaustion are not when you do too much, but when there is not a single moment that belongs to you. Every hour is predetermined. Every movement must be on time, according to external standards. And because of that, you begin to feel like someone living according to another person's calendar. On a deeper level, this does not only cause fatigue, it causes disconnection. You no longer know what you want, because every desire must come after obligation. You no longer hear your inner call clearly, because it is constantly interrupted by reminder alerts. Gradually, life energy does not disappear. It freezes. It waits for another moment, another kairos to flow again. Jung once said, the creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct. The new is not born from intellectual force, but from the natural movement of the life instinct, and that instinct only appears when inner time is respected, when you allow yourself to slow down long enough to listen. Perhaps you are in a phase where the future is arriving too quickly, while the present cannot be fully touched. You no longer want to return to your old life, but you are not yet able to imagine what a new life might look like. And in that gap, your body asks to pause, not to give up, but to resynchronize. Try asking yourself one question, very slowly. Am I tired because I am doing too much? Or because there is no moment that belongs to my own time? If that question makes you fall silent for a few seconds, you may have touched the core, because many adults are not exhausted by work itself, but by the absence of inner time to live that life. Everything happens on schedule, but out of rhythm. The solution here is not quitting your job, cutting off responsibilities, or running away from society. Jung never encouraged extreme confrontation. What he emphasized was adjustment. You do not need to destroy chronos. You only need to open a small gap for kairos to enter, a stretch of time that is not measured, a morning without a schedule, an afternoon without having to Do something on time. A moment of lying still, without guilt. That alone is enough for the body to begin cooperating again, not because you have rested enough, but because you have begun living in the right rhythm. And if right now you realize that you are very tired, yet cannot tell where the fatigue comes from, try looking again at how you are using your time. Perhaps what your soul is trying to say is not rest, but rather, give me back a rhythm of living that I can step into with both body and soul. You were not born to run endlessly according to someone else's schedule. You were born to live in dialogue between the outer world and inner timing. When these two rhythms meet, energy does not need to struggle to return. It comes naturally, like someone who has finally arrived home on time to themselves. Sign 7. You are exhausted because success no longer nourishes your soul. There is a truth that is very hard to accept in adulthood. Not all exhaustion comes from failure. There are forms of burnout that arise precisely when you are doing things right, moving forward, achieving the things you once believed would save you. Success is still there, position is still there, stability remains intact, but the soul is no longer being fed. This is the most dangerous axis of exhaustion, because it gives you no clear reason to stop. There is no incident, no external crisis, nothing wrong to fix. There is only a very quiet feeling. You continue living, but no longer feel that you are living from the inside. You still fulfill your responsibilities. You still maintain your performance. You are still recognized. But if you are honest with yourself, you will see that your energy no longer comes from enthusiasm, but from inertia. You do things because you are used to doing them. You continue because you do not know where to stop. And in that state, your body begins to ask to lie still. Not because you are weak, but because what once nourished you is no longer the right food for your soul. Carl Jung warned very clearly about this phenomenon when he spoke of the danger of the ego fully identifying with achievement. When a person ties their self-worth to accomplishing, advancing, and outperforming others, there comes a point when every victory becomes merely a repetition. And when the unconscious realizes that winning more will not save anything inside, it begins to withdraw energy from the race. Jung wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. There are phases when your problem is not whether you are doing well or poorly, but that you have outgrown the life you are living. You are no longer excited by the things that once made you proud, not because you look down on them, but because they have completed their role in your life. Praise comes, you acknowledge it. A new achievement appears, and you nod. But inside, there is no cheer, no vibration, no sense of, this is right. Only a quiet but persistent emptiness, like a room filled with furniture, but no longer any warmth. Success still comes, but it no longer touches you. This is not ingratitude. It is a natural psychological movement when the soul has moved beyond an old level of living. Jung believed that human beings cannot live forever on the same value system. When the ego has been reinforced long enough by achievement, the soul begins to demand a different question: what do I live for? Rather than, what can I accomplish? The problem is that very few people are taught how to listen to that question. Instead, we are taught to keep going, to be strong, to capitalize on advantages, to maintain performance. And so many people keep running, even though they are exhausted inside. In that state, the longing to lie down all day is not avoidance. It is the only way the soul has left to say, pause for a moment. This no longer nourishes me. Have you noticed that you begin to feel most tired, not when doing difficult work, but when doing things that once felt very familiar? There are mornings when you wake up not because you hate your job, but because you no longer feel a reason to get out of bed. Not sad, not angry, just without fire. Jung once wrote, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Facing the truth that your current success no longer nourishes you is deeply painful because it forces you to admit that what once saved you is no longer enough, and that terrifies the ego. Because if you no longer cling to this achievement, then who are you? That is why many people continue living a life that has lost meaning for them, simply because they fear the emptiness behind it. But the unconscious does not fear emptiness. It fears betrayal. And when you continue investing energy into a life that is no longer authentic, The unconscious chooses the only way to protect you, withdrawing energy from action, not to punish you, but to force you to look again. There is a very important question here, and you do not need to answer it with reason. Simply listen to the first reaction in your body. If you continue succeeding exactly as you are now, for the next 10 years, do you truly want to live that life? If that question makes you fall silent, if your chest sinks slightly, if there is a vague feeling you cannot name, then perhaps your soul has already answered. At this stage, many people mistakenly believe they need a drastic change, quit their job, tear everything down, and rebuild, jump into a different life. But Jung did not believe in transformation through rushed action. He believed in staying long enough in the emptiness for something new to form. The solution to this sign is not action, but honesty. Honest that you have lived long enough on old motivation. Honest that this success has completed its mission. And honestly that you do not yet know what comes next. But you are willing to stop pretending. You do not need to abandon everything. You only need to stop forcing yourself to feel fine when inside you are no longer being nourished. When you allow yourself to acknowledge this, a very subtle movement occurs. The exhaustion begins to change its shape. It is no longer a meaningless burden, but becomes a guiding signal, a necessary pause for your soul to prepare a different definition of success, not based on quantity, but on alignment. And if right now you are lying still, not wanting to conquer anything more, not wanting to prove anything more, remember this. You are not falling behind. You are pausing a game that is already complete to prepare to step into another level of living, where value no longer comes from achieving, but from living in accordance with what is inside you that is asking to be lived. The longing to lie down all day, in this sign, is not a complaint. It is a very deep question your soul is asking, and perhaps, for the first time, in a long while, you do not need to answer immediately. You only need to be there, to listen, and to trust that this exhaustion has not come to take anything away from you, but to lead you back to a truer meaning. Sign 8. Your body is reacting to a truth your mind has not yet dared to name. You are not tired because you lack motivation. You are tired because you have been holding on to a suppressed truth for too long. This is a very particular kind of exhaustion. It does not come from not trying hard enough. On the contrary, it often appears in people who have tried very hard. You still think. You still analyze. You still tell yourself that you are fine, that everything is reasonable, still logical, still correct. But your body does not comply. It slows down. It grows heavier each time you prepare to do something that your rational mind labels as the right role, what should be done, something you must continue. And strangely, there are very brief moments when you think about a different direction, a different possibility, a choice you have not yet dared to take when your body suddenly feels lighter, not clearly, not strongly enough to make you change immediately, but enough for you to feel it. This is not a coincidence. This is the language of an unnamed truth. Carl Jung called this state psychic tension, the psychological tension between what the unconscious already knows and what the ego is not yet ready to accept. When a truth has already formed at a deep level about a relationship, a life path, a career choice, or a social role, but the ego continues to deny it, the body becomes the signaling system in place of words. Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. The pain here does not have to be intense emotion. It can be very quiet, very tiring, very heavy, as if your entire inner system is straining just to keep silent." Have you noticed that this exhaustion is often not evenly distributed? It intensifies at very specific moments, when you are about to step into a familiar day, when you are about to meet someone with whom you are no longer truly connected, when you stand before a choice that is proper, stable, socially approved, but inside, you no longer feel a sense of belonging. You are not afraid to act. You are tired of continuing to play a role. At the conscious level, you may say, "I'm fine," but at a deeper level, there is a part of you that already knows, this is no longer right for me. And because you have not allowed yourself to acknowledge that, the tension cannot be released through thought. It is released through the body. That is why your body reacts so clearly to role-correct situations. A meeting, an appointment, a familiar plan, a predefined path. Just thinking about stepping into it, your shoulders grow heavy. Your chest tightens. Your energy drops rapidly. You want to lie still, not because you do not want to live, but because you cannot continue living against what you already know. By contrast, there are very small moments, perhaps when you imagine yourself turning in a different direction, even very vaguely, when your body breathes a little easier. Not excitement, just less weight, less pressure, less strain. And that subtle difference is the most important clue. Jung wrote, "The body is the shadow of the psyche. The body does not create the problem. It merely reflects what the psyche has not yet dared to speak." Many people mistake this state for a lack of motivation, depression, or weakness. They try to fix it by forcing themselves to be more positive, stronger, and more disciplined. But that only increases the tension, because the problem is not energy, it is the truth being avoided. That truth may be very simple, yet very difficult to admit. It might be, "I no longer love this job." It might be, "This relationship is no longer right." It might be, "I am living according to other people's expectations." It might be, "This current version is no longer me." It does not need to be spoken as a sentence. It only needs to exist as a very clear, very real feeling that you have not yet allowed yourself to name. And because the truth does not pass through consciousness, it goes around through the body. This is why Jung emphasized that the unconscious does not speak in logic. It speaks through images, sensations, dreams, and bodily reactions. When you continue to avoid it, the body has to do the work for the mind. Have you ever wondered why you feel most exhausted not when doing difficult work, but when doing familiar work? Why are you not drained when thinking about new possibilities, but feel depleted when thinking about continuing the old path? That is not a sign that you are lost. It is a sign that you already know very well, you just have not dared to admit it. The opening question here is not, "What should I do?" It is there a truth you have felt very clearly, but have not yet allowed yourself to acknowledge? Pay attention to your body's first reaction when you hear that question. Do not answer with thoughts. Do not analyze. Simply notice. Does something inside you contract, or does it soften? Because your body is often far more honest than your ego. The role of this sign in the journey is not to force you into action. Jung never encouraged facing the truth in a violent way toward oneself. He believed that what matters most is dialogue, allowing the truth to exist in awareness, even without resolving it immediately. The practical solution at this stage is very gentle. No big decisions, no declarations, no immediate changes. What is necessary is simply this: stop lying to yourself. Stop naming your exhaustion with vague explanations. Stop forcing yourself to be fine, when inside, there is no longer agreement. When you allow the truth to be present, even in silence, a portion of the tension automatically eases, not because the problem has been solved, but because the inner system no longer has to strain to hide it. Jung wrote, "What you resist persists. The truth you avoid does not disappear. It only changes form. When suppressed, it becomes exhaustion. When acknowledged, it becomes direction." And here, the longing to lie down all day is not a sign of giving up. It is a pause created by the body so that you do not continue running from the truth. A very gentle reminder. Stop. There is something inside that needs to be heard. You do not need to know right away where you are going. You only need to know that the current path is no longer completely right for you. And if you are in this stage, please remember, you are not weak. You are very close to honesty. This exhaustion has not come to make you collapse. It has come to protect you from continuing to live against what you have known for a very long time. When the mind has not yet dared to name it, the body will speak. And if you listen carefully enough, you will realize that this truth has not come to destroy your life. It has come to bring you back to a more authentic way of living, where energy no longer has to be spent on hiding, but can be used to live. Sign 9. You are learning to let go of control, and your ego is panicking. Exhaustion, at this stage, is no longer a sign of lacking energy. It feels more like a ritual of stripping the ego of its power. A very quiet process, but a thorough one. You are not exhausted because you did something wrong. You are exhausted because the part inside you that once commanded everything is gradually losing control, and it is not used to that. For a long time, you lived by control, controlling emotions, controlling plans, controlling image, controlling the future. You believed that if you were alert enough, proactive enough, disciplined enough, everything would be fine. And perhaps, at a certain stage, that was true. But then, there comes a point when, even though you are still doing everything right, your body begins to refuse cooperation, willpower weakens, decisiveness fades. You no longer want to manage your life as tightly as before, and this terrifies the ego. Carl Jung believed that before every phase of deep maturation, the ego must weaken so that the self can emerge. He wrote, "The ego cannot help falling into error, because it is bound to its own limited perspective. When the ego has completed its role, building, protecting, directing but still clings to command, it becomes an obstacle to the next stage of growth, and the unconscious intervenes. That intervention does not come with thunder and lightning. It comes through exhaustion, through the desire to lie still, through withdrawal from the effort to control. As if there were another hand inside you, gently resting on the ego's shoulder and saying, 'Enough. This is no longer the time to command.' That is why, in this phase, you begin to notice a very strange reversal. Willpower, the thing that once propelled you forward, weakens, but intuition grows stronger. You no longer want to make long-term plans, yet you know very clearly what is not right. You are no longer interested in forcing yourself to understand everything, yet you sense direction through very subtle signals, a heaviness, a lightness, a vague sense of safety when thinking about one thing, and a clear tension when thinking about another. The ego hates this state because it cannot control it, it cannot measure it, it cannot explain it, and when it cannot control, the ego labels it being lost, weakness, decline. But Jung saw the opposite. He believed this was the moment of an inner transfer of power. Have you noticed that the longing to lie down all day often comes with a very deep release, not giving up, but letting go of the need to make everything go according to plan? You no longer want to strain, no longer want to intervene, no longer want to fix. Simply lying still feels safer than continuing to try to control. That does not mean you are becoming passive. It means the ego is temporarily losing command, so that a deeper part of you, the part that knows the natural rhythm of life, can speak. Jung called that part the self, not a better ego, but a deeper regulating center, where you do not need control to exist. But for the self to appear, the ego must step back, and the ego never steps back peacefully. It always resists. It fears that without control, everything will collapse. So ask yourself very honestly, if you no longer needed to control, what do you fear would happen most? Do you fear you would fail? Fear you would be abandoned? Fear you would become useless? Or fear that if you stopped straining, you would have to face a truth that control has long helped you avoid? This question does not need an immediate answer. You only need to recognize the fear behind the need for control, because control rarely comes from strength. It usually comes from a very old fear. Fear of losing safety, fear of losing value, fear of no longer being useful. Jung wrote, "The more rigid a man's ego, the more fragile he becomes when life demands transformation. When life demands that you grow differently, every effort to maintain old control becomes the source of exhaustion. And fatigue, at this point, is no longer the enemy. It is a ritual of disarmament. That is why you no longer want to manage everything, no longer want to stand at the front carrying the load, no longer want to hold it all. And that does not mean you are giving up. It is a sign that you are entering a stage where trust matters more than control. Trust does not mean abandonment. It means allowing life to guide part of the rhythm. Instead of forcing it to conform to your will, you begin to listen to small signals. You allow yourself not to know. You accept ambiguity. And it is precisely in this state that the self has space to reorganize the entire inner system. The desire to lie still, in this phase, is a very deep act. It says, "I no longer have the energy to keep being the controller." And that is not failure. It is a transfer. You are not losing strength. You are learning a different kind of strength. A strength that does not come from tightening, but from letting go at the right moment. Not from commanding, but from listening. Not from having to do, but from being allowed to be. If you are here, perhaps the ego in you is very anxious. It does not know what will replace it. It fears being abandoned. But Jung reminds us that the ego does not disappear in this process. It is simply placed back in its proper position, no longer the sole driver, but one part within a larger system. And when this transfer is complete, you will not return as the old version of yourself. You will act less from control and more from feeling. You will no longer need to strain to be right. You will know what to do with a very quiet certainty. So if today you find yourself tired, wanting to lie still, not wanting to decide, not wanting to control, perhaps this is the first time in your life that you are learning to trust a wisdom deeper than your own ego, and this exhaustion has not come to take anything from you. It has come to give you back a different kind of power, the power to live without having to strain to control everything. That is not a weakness. That is very deep maturity. If these Jungian psychological reflections resonate with you, I would truly like to hear your thoughts. Are you exhausted because you have been controlling too much? Or because it is time to let go, but you have not yet dared to? Leave a comment sometimes. Simply naming what we are experiencing is enough for the process of transformation to begin. We are often taught that exhaustion is a sign of something that needs to be fixed, overcome, that we need to be stronger. But the journey we have just gone through reveals another possibility. Sometimes, exhaustion does not come to hold you back, but to protect you from continuing down the wrong path. The longing to lie down all day is not surrender. It may be the moment when your soul is trying to be heard for the first time in a very long while. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Perhaps what is slowing you down is not that you are becoming weaker, but that a deeper part of you is preparing to step into the light. If you see yourself in these signs, remember that you are not alone. You are simply leaving an old rhythm of life to return closer to your inner truth. And if you want to continue these journeys of diving deeper into the inner world with Jung, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. Thank you for staying, and I look forward to meeting you on the next journey.